Somebody move the daggone camera.
All right, did you get it working?
Yeah, but then somebody moved the camera over there. So.
I can readjust it.
It's not. That's good.
Exactly what I remember trying to do it right now. I'll forget later when somebody called.
You're now officially good. And I don't want to spam. I'll tell you.
All right.
Oh, I did. Such a great day to have my 50th
Did it get moved
today.
again?
That was for Friday.
I'll be good.
I just now noticed it, so
But I won't put it anywhere where it can mess up anything. Everything's working. No. And I would almost like
Right back, so.
headset back on? Turn on? It's time for citizens' opportunity to address council, and we have a bunch of folks here tonight. So I'll probably have to keep us a little closer to, making sure we stay within the 3 minutes, and just so you know, it's not arbitrary. I have a timer here. State your name. If you are 9 feet tall, push that mic up, pointing towards your mouth, and if you're 5 feet tall, pull it down towards your mouth when you speak. But state your name and address, and open now. Yes, sir.
My name is Jerry Pearson.
Into the mic so that she gets it.
My name is Jerry Pearson. I don't come here often, but I see where we're asking for an extra policeman so we can.
I'm so sorry, would you also give your address for the record?
15 Oliver Court,
Thank you so much.
Signal Mountain. Okay, sorry. So I see where we're wanting to hire an extra policeman because we need extra calls for Walden. Do we get paid for helping Walden out when they have no policemen?
We do not.
Why would we do it? Maybe that's not a good question. Let me say this. A $300,000 house in Signal Mountain, the taxes are about $1,500. In Walden, it's about $300. So it seems to me if we're furnishing police protection for Walden, all we're doing is subsidizing their taxes, and we don't need to do that. I've got a couple of friends that live in Brow Estates, could buy and sell me out of the petty cash. And so my suggestion would be, if we have an agreement, we ought to get paid for it. Surely we wouldn't want to hire an extra policeman to service Walden because they're having more calls where wife's beating the husband or whatever the emergency is.
So, thank you, and I could address all your questions. I want to be careful about that because what the purpose of this at the beginning of meetings is to give us information as we make decisions. However, there is always a public hearing when a budget ordinance is read, and that is more of a conversation, and so that'll be coming up sometime in June.
Okay.
And we don't know yet. Right now, that request for a police officer is not in the budget.
Yeah.
It's not in there, just.
It's a need that was expressed during our budget meeting by our police chief.
Okay.
That we
How do
can't
I know when
accommodate.
we're going to have a meeting that addresses that?
It'll be, well, I don't want to say that there's a meeting specifically to address that, because that would be dishonest, and the public hearing is more of a conversation, and I do have to be careful, we won't get anywhere.
Yeah.
The meetings will be they're the second and fourth Monday, but even then, the best way is to check the front of Town Hall, where the meetings are posted, subscribe to the town's email blast, and then you get notice of all the meetings. Are you on Facebook?
No.
No, that's okay. You probably have a better life because of that. That's going to be the best ways for you to do
But
it.
I do have emails and texts.
Yeah, so write the town and they'll get you subscribed to.
Okay, I will come
to
by
the
and do
email
that.
blast.
Thank you,
All right,
sir.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Mary Hudson, 1150 James Boulevard. I'll say this real quickly. In regard to what he said, I had asked Chip Baker about that, and my understanding from what he said is that Hamilton County Sheriff's Department serves Walden, and so it seems like it's a discussion with Hamilton County for more service for the Walden County area. But I wanted to compliment our town government and our town council. As I told someone on a community Facebook page today, I've never before observed as much communication and transparency from our town hall as well as from our town leaders. As you said to him, we have on the town website the public postings of meetings and agendas. We get the email blast. I was just shocked today to see someone had posted, but she quickly took it down, that tonight there would be a vote on a tax increase.
I didn't post that and I didn't take anything down.
You know, I wasn't referring to you.
Oh, okay.
No, it was an individual.
Gotcha.
A citizen, I know her, and she's very involved. And I quickly posted the agenda up screenshot to say this is not on the agenda, it's a discussion. And she thanked me for it. But I realized that there's so many people still not connected to the town, and there's so many ways to do it, as well as I've posted the budget sessions videos. Those of you here who don't know, all the town meetings, the budget sessions, and I believe there may be other committee meetings are posted or live streamed. There are people tonight watching this, and it's on Signal Watch on YouTube. So we just are so fortunate to have the ability to be engaged even if we're not here. So I wanted to thank you all for that.
Thank you.
I wanted to clarify something too, Mary. I spoke with the chief today, and Chief Williams, correct me if I'm wrong, Walden used to contract with the county, but a year ago, they didn't renew that contract.
Okay.
So they're,
Okay.
county's not servicing Walden.
All right,
We are.
that's what Chip Baker told me in January. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Is that right? Walden no longer contracting with the county?
That's great.
Okay.
Been about
But
a year now since
the-
the contract expired.
They don't contract for dedicated service, but the county still provides service for Walden. They're required by law to provide them the same service they would anywhere in the county. So that's all they're doing right now.
Would it be helpful to everyone in the audience to just have either Bo or either the chiefs kind of just give a brief explanation of how the mutual aid agreements work?
Yeah, I think that would be great, yeah.
We do it.
Sure, we could save it for the meeting as well. I kind of like to give citizens a chance to finish their part, and then, but let's do that. I think that's an important thing.
That's a good idea, thank you.
Anyone else want to approach the mic? Up there.
Donovan Ronaldo, 7 Cherokee Lane. Just in time to show you how confused I am. Why do we have to have a fee and a separate account for the maintenance? Is it not covered presently in the budget allocation?
Maintenance of what, Don?
What was the separate fee for? I'm not getting the terminology quite right.
You mean the sanitation fee?
Yeah. Yes.
That was just an option to look at.
Okay, I hope we don't look at it too hard, because if it's covered, it's covered. The increment in cost, that's got to be considered. But just setting it to a separate account, especially with a new accompanying fee, I don't think that's really the right thing to be doing, or necessary. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Don. Anyone else?
Ann Haygood, 506 James Boulevard. I'll start by saying that no one, probably including our town council members, really wants a tax increase. I'll also say that emotions are running high. It would behoove us to remember that we are all neighbors. Gracious attitudes and words are needed and will help us arrive at solutions. It goes without saying that the town's budget for the upcoming year is tight. There are reasons for that. Those reasons do not include some of the accusations being made, like spendthrift council members, lack of transparency, gross inefficiencies on the part of town staff, or anyone getting rich on our taxes. Signal Mountain provides its residents with quality services in exchange for our tax dollars. Precisely because they do such a good job, we often do not notice how smoothly and reliably those services are delivered. Services cost money. Good employees cost money. Good equipment costs money. And those costs rise a little bit every year just to stay even. Project costs rise astronomically with this booming economy. When extras are added, like the new fire station, costs rise even further, and it's not just for construction, but for the 9 new firefighters at that station who are there to protect us. That's an ongoing operating cost. And we can't keep taking money from our rainy day fund to cover those operating costs. Our town council is now faced with difficult decisions: what to cut, what to leave in, how to pay for it all. If we're not willing to cut services, we have to increase revenue. There are not a lot of ways for us to do that. One way is to raise taxes. Another that some have suggested is selling various of our town assets to bring in cash rather than raising revenue from taxes. But that's a problem with that. It's like selling your house to pay off your credit card debt. Your credit card debt exists because you were spending more than you had coming in, and robbing Peter to pay Paul doesn't solve the problem. It just allows you to keep spending more than you have and delays the day of reckoning. When you've used up all the money from the sale of your house, you're right back into a financial hole because you didn't balance your budget and you no longer own that house. Our household finances can't survive that kind of behavior, and neither can our towns. I don't want any higher taxes any more than the rest of you, but I am grateful we have a town council who are willing to make the tough decisions to get our financial house in order. I thank you for that.
Thank you. 3 minutes and 10 seconds, just so you know. It's okay. Anyone else? Yes.
My name is Denise Thomas. I live at 425 Timberlinks Drive, and I was wanting to address the tax, the 22% tax that may be voted on. I understand that, you know, we're building homes and things are growing up here, but, you know, our family is maxed out pretty much. We pay a lot in taxes. We pay county taxes. We pay city taxes. And if I'm correct, I think Hamilton County taxes are going up.
Probably.
Water's about to go up. Is that right?
Definitely.
You know, that's a lot of increase for a family of four. I know a lot of people aren't rich up here. I volunteer at the Close House, volunteer in my church. I know more mediocre families trying to keep up and make it that live up here. So I would ask that you would look at other avenues of taxes and not 22%. To me, I've never heard of that kind of a tax hike ever. Just look at other options. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, anyone else? Yes.
I didn't come prepared to say anything. I just sort of listened to everything else. And my name's Chris Cole. I live at 320 Green Gorge Road here in Signal Mountain. I also appreciate all of the services that the town of Signal Mountain provides. I think they're super for a community like this. But I'm a retired military. I received a 3.5% cost of living increase this year. I received approximately 3.5% Social Security increase this year. The county wants to raise my taxes. They don't say the percentage, they just say $39 per $100 per or $1,000 worth of property, which in May is going to be about $400 or $500 a year. Y'all want to raise it 22%. That's by far exceeds any cost of living allowances that anyone on a fixed income has received over the past several years. I think we need to think about it.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
All right, anyone else? Yes, sir.
My name is Patrick Daverson. I live at 1245 Mountain Brook Circle.
Patrick?
Daverson, D-A-V as in Victor, E-R-S-O-N.
Thank you.
I realize I'm the president of the Signal Mountain Soccer League. 1245 Mountain Brook Circle. I'm here tonight on behalf of the Signal Mountain Soccer League. I'm the current president of the Signal Mountain Board for Soccer. And we're just kind of looking at some things that have come out recently about taking over the Shackelford Ridge complex. Some things that I wanted to point out to the town council is that 20 years ago, Signal Mountain Soccer League, much like some of the other sports on this mountain, did not have a place to play. They went to Hamilton County. Hamilton County built Shackelford Ridge Soccer Complex. It was built 4 soccer fields. They donated $90,000 of then Signal Mountain Soccer funds to have the fields laser grade, put in the irrigation, and to keep the property up. We have been the lessee of the property for the past 20 years since that happened. Currently, we're in the middle of a $100,000 lighting project. We didn't ask for money from Signal Mountain, didn't ask for money from Hamilton County Parks and Rec. We lit one grid. I'm on the hook for another $25,000 for this summer. Poles are being delivered tomorrow, and I'm finding out on Facebook that we're no longer in charge of the fields. So that's a little disheartening, considering that my maintenance contracts start June 1, which means that my mowing contracts, my fertilization contracts, and everything else are coming forward. And I've not been addressed about financials. I've not had a conversation with anyone, with the exception of Ms. Speak today, just calling, giving her my concerns. Hamilton County will not return my phone calls. So I'm just kind of curious, without talking to the person that's not necessarily that I've been in charge of it for 20 years, but we know everything that's gone on there. And like nobody's come to us and said, hey, what does it cost to run a soccer league? What does it cost to maintain these fields? What does it cost to do these things? And unlike baseball or softball, at the end of the day, if Signal Mountain Baseball, as long as you guys took those over, you're taking over things that you have. Like, you've got 3 fields out there. There's nothing out there that Hamilton County Parks and Rec paid for. There's nothing out there that Signal Mountain paid for. There's no goals that they paid for. There's no paint machines. There's no gators. There's no equipment. We worked hand in hand with the football team, helping them purchase equipment, helping the high school soccer field purchase equipment. They use our equipment daily, and all of them practice on our fields. So I'm just a little concerned about like what we're looking at, and really more of a timeline so that we can, I'm about to be on the hook for 40 grand over the next 90 days. That's $15,000 in mowing, anywhere from last year, I think we paid $1,200 to water the fields. 2 years ago, in the middle of a drought, we paid $8,500 to water the fields. That didn't require a vote. That just required us paying the bill. And so, and again, we're in the town of Walden, and when we had a leak out there, they were like, yeah, the bill's still $4,500. And we're like, yeah, but we're part of it. And they're like, no, you're not part of anything. You use $4,500 worth of water.
So Patrick, we've gone over the 3.
Sorry.
But that's okay, because, I mean, you're passionate, and you're passionate about what you do, and I appreciate that. I coach soccer, so I've been out there many times. There's no one on this dais who's been in any meetings with the county, other than the town manager. So the council isn't involved in that, and your contract isn't with the town of Signal Mountain. And so we don't have a contract, and we haven't changed anything. And I guess that's about as far as I can speak to it, because it's not our contract.
Well, I understand that, but you're saying you posted on Facebook, you personally posted that was going to happen.
I didn't. I have no ability to make anything happen. I'm one person with one vote. I also have the ability to share as much information about what is shared with us publicly, and what was shared with us publicly came from the town manager and is a part of our budget book. Therefore, it is a part of public record, and I think it's important to get that out. My saying what's in the proposed budget book is not some sort of destiny for something to happen. That's not how this works. But I'd love to have Manager Beal bring us up to date as to where we are, in this idea, and see if you can.
Very quickly can do that. I mean, at this point, we have had one meeting and we've had a discussion, and that's it. And we're looking at the prospect of if the county has to change how that facility as a whole is managed and the fields are scheduled and all of that, how can we best do that for the community? That was the gist of the discussion with governmental entities that are involved. The town has been involved in that. The first grant that was received to build that, the town carried and contributed to the project, if I'm not mistaken. County Parks and Rec and HCDE are involved in that facility, either as owner or lessee. And they were in discussions, and I was asked to come as the third governmental entity that has jurisdiction in that area because it is in the town of Signal Mountain. So we had a meeting and discussed possibilities and had a second meeting scheduled that was canceled because we couldn't get some of the folks there, and that's it. That's all we've done. This budget contains some information and some contingencies so that if that should happen, we're in a position to move forward. That's it.
So, I mean, I guess and I just want to make sure that I'm being clear and on the record on this. So you're telling me right now that Signal Mountain Soccer League should just shell out $50,000 over the next 90 days
there's no
in lieu of, like, we may or may not be playing or not participating on the fields out there.
There's no one here who could tell you that would have any authority to tell you that.
But, okay.
And I want you to understand also, I'm not totally sure our doing this is a good idea yet. I don't know. We haven't discussed this as a council. We haven't heard from you, except for now, which is reasonable for you to be here, I understand. We haven't heard. We are going to have to get a lot more information before we make a decision. No decision has been made, no deliberation has happened. And I can read, I can read you what I posted on Facebook with the word potential in front and behind almost everything.
I'm
because
aware of
all
that.
this is potential. And so I did not announce that this is happening.
No, and that's why I'm here tonight, is to make sure that, like, that I'm involved, or our board is involved, or our league is involved in this process. I realize that my lease, give or take, is or is not currently with the county, and that you guys have absolutely no input. I won't say absolutely no input on that, but right now, the people at the county are not answering my phone calls.
And that sounds like a problem, and I hope that gets resolved. Sounds like we all need to sit down together so
You
that we
need
can.
a seat at the table.
Yes, that's all I'm asking for, is a seat at the table.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's not going to be the best thing since sliced bread. But right now, I'm kind of in a, fiduciary responsibility to my board, is that, basically the way our league works is you operate in the red June through August, knowing that you'll be in the black by the end of November. And I can't do that and proceed with those projects.
I'll be happy tonight to write an email to those that I think should be paying attention to your phone calls.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
All right, anyone else? Yes, sir.
Hey.
Charles Gardner, 127 Golf Drive, Signal Mountain. Members of the council, I wanted to report on an activity that was availed myself to do with Chief Mitchell. I went on the ride-along program with the Signal Mountain Police Department, and I drew the second shift and rode around with Sergeant Bingham and was able to pepper him with questions, and just wanted to kind of share my experience, having just moved back here from a long time away, and spent some good time. And actually, we've got a lot to be proud of with our police force here on Signal Mountain, being, that they've received certification in a small town group and all those good things. But I came from running field operations for a long time in the construction industry, so I know about allocation of resources and how they're of best effect. And there was a lot of similarities. And I noticed that basically our equipment was in pretty decent shape. We got new vehicles, and they making the most economy on utilizing the equipment and the radios and how they synchronize with Chattanooga. The one thing that, and I know there's a lot of people that want to talk about the budget, since that's kind of high up on the list. And I read through the budget, but I think, and I would suggest as you're going through that, you consider probably one additional full-time person on each of the 2 shifts to get you adequate coverage. If you have something out in Walden and we go to help that, or down at the foot of the mountain, we're a little bit thin. Just my observation, something to think about. I know it's not in the discussion right now, but I wanted to put that forward, that if you could kind of work with that. The only other observation, everybody talks about attracting, keeping, and retaining good employees. And you got a lot of good employees, but a little bit weak on the benefits side of that. And I know there's only a limited amount you could do with that, but keep that in mind. So my recommendations would be support Chief Mitchell and his great group of people with 1 additional person on each shift, and then see if you can work in something about the benefits so we keep the good people that we have. Thanks.
Thank you, Charles. Anyone else? All right, seeing no one else, we'll close that portion of the meeting. We now move on to, well, actually, let's still hold off till we get down to the budget, and then we'll have that conversation, if that's okay, Bill? Wait till we get to that, to the budget discussion. All right, first resolution is a beautification committee appointment. Resolution appointing Laura Malone as a member of the Signal Mountain Beautification Subcommittee of the Town of Signal Mountain's Advisory Committee.
Make a
Anyone?
motion to accept.
Motion from Bob to accept.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Is Laura here? Nope. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposed. It carries 4. Amy, did you vote? Carries 5-0. Next, we have another resolution authorizing additional funds to Adams Contracting water line replacement at Shoal Creek Falls. Turn this over to Boyd.
This is in conjunction with the bridge replacement on Shoal Creek Falls. The water line replacement was engineered and bid separately from the bridge project because it's a utility relocation. We're responsible for that, just like any other utility is. Ultimately, when the project was redesigned and the bridge was changed, there were some changes that required additional line for the water line. The wing wall on the bridge was extended, so that required additional work. So this is the change order to accommodate that additional work. I will point out that it is for $28,000. So I went ahead and did the resolution for that amount, but the original contract was for $109,000, and we're now down to $102,000 because we've identified about $7,000 in savings, and I think we're going to have some additional deduct items as well. So we won't see a $28,000 increase in this project because we've identified some savings.
Good.
So this is just to document it and make sure that it's clear that change orders for 28, that will not be complete overage on the project.
Okay. I'll read the resolution, and we'll see if there's a motion. A resolution authorizing additional funds for the contract with Adams Contracting LLC in the amount of $28,033 to cover added work to extend the removal and replacement of water line associated with the Shoal Creek Falls Bridge replacement.
Second.
Any discussion? Do we know how close we are to being done on that project?
Pretty close.
And because I know everybody in the room probably didn't watch the entire 6 hours or 7 hours of budget discussions, the pavement's going to be redone as well. That's high on the priority list because it's a mess, and it's going to be a mess after the bridge is done. So that's one of the things requiring some attention. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Carries 5-0. Next, we have a resolution authorizing purchase of 2019 Dodge Ram 1500 by the fire department. Boyd, I'm assuming this is part of the normal vehicle replacement schedule?
This isn't vehicle replacement. It was a capital item for this year that is budgeted.
Already budgeted?
Yep.
Okay. I'll read the resolution. A resolution authorizing the town manager to purchase one 2019 Ram 1500 Street Crew Cab. Is that Street Crew? ST?
ST.
ST Crew Cab. And aftermarket equipment per Tennessee State Contract Number TN SWC 209 from Columbia Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram Fiat Columbia, Tennessee for a total amount not to exceed $32,757.44 to be used by the fire department for the town of Signal Mountain. Do we hear a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second, Bob. Any discussion?
Is this truck just being straight out purchased, or is it coming from like a pool of ability to purchase it like through state?
It's off the state contract. So we get the state contract price on it, and that is the vehicle and the emergency equipment.
Is it?
We're getting their fee base, you mean the pricing based on state pricing?
Yeah, we're getting the same price if the state of Tennessee were to purchase it.
Do we have any choice as to where those come from when we purchase through the pool? Like if we wanted to try to force that to be a local purchase?
No. On the state contract, they bid it out statewide and beyond at times. And the dealership that's awarded this state contract for any specific vehicle, sometimes they have more than one dealer on state contract, but generally for these types of vehicles, there's one dealer for the state. And if you want to purchase off that contract, that's where you get it.
Okay.
In the past, we have bid things out independent of the state contract to see if we could beat it, and generally that's not the case. Okay. So that's, if you're going to get the state price, you're going to get it from the state dealer.
Yeah. All right. Do we have a motion to approve? We did it first and second. You guys ready to vote?
Mm-hmm.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, it carries 5-0. We move now to ordinances. First ordinance amends the Administrative Officer Code, and this is something that we were required to do because of a state change. And was it not a state change?
I will mainly defer to Harry, but
well, we have our representative here. We can ask her anything state related today.
to be able to utilize this position to address issues with short-term rentals, we need to make this change.
Oh, okay. We're gonna have one of the ordinances is about short-term rentals in a moment, and so this changes a position to maybe, or do you want to do that?
The state law initially only allowed an administrative hearing officer to hear violations of building codes. In 2017, state law was changed to allow an administrative hearing officer to hear locally enacted zoning ordinances. So this amendment to the ordinance will allow the Signal Mountain's administrative hearing officer to hear violations of Signal Mountain's zoning ordinances, which is going to include short-term vacation rentals.
So this could apply to other zoning ordinances as well as.
Yes. And
Signal Mountain zoning ordinances,
okay.
Correct, all zoning ordinances. Uh-huh.
And the big difference between utilizing the administrative hearing officer and the municipal court is municipal courts can fine up to $50. Administrative hearing officer can levy a fine up to $500. So when you're dealing with business entities and such that are operating, having a more significant authority on fining could be beneficial in getting issues resolved.
And our administrative hearing officer is Charlie Poss right now?
That's correct.
How long has he been in that position, and how is that appointed?
It's been, since it was created, it's been a few years. We haven't utilized him. He's on that as needed and is only paid when utilized. So since the scope until now has been fairly limited, we haven't had the necessity.
Is he always in that position, or do we have to redo that each year?
No, it's appointed.
Okay.
For, I don't remember the last term, but I believe it's a 3-year term, but I'm not positive.
All right. The ordinance says, an ordinance amending Section 12-801 of the Signal Mountain Town Code to give the administrative hearing officer the power to hear violations of locally adopted zoning codes. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve.
Have a first and a second. Any further discussion?
Does this have anything to do with the BZA at all? I mean, I know it's, but how does this some of these things here, are they BZA issues too, that's listed on this?
I don't think the BZA hears violations. They would hear variance requests and that type thing.
Okay.
Anything else? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, it carries 5-0. Now we're going to do the ordinance that addresses short-term rentals. And I'll start by reading it so we can just get right into the discussion. An ordinance to amend Title IX of the Signal Mountain Town Code, enacting a Chapter 3 thereof to address the regulation of short-term vacation rentals within the town of Signal Mountain. This started at the Planning Commission, and we talked about it several meetings and went back and forth with our planners and learned a lot about what you can and can't do with this. The state changed this, and the state was lobbied actually by the short-term rental industry quite a bit. So we're fairly restricted as to what we can and can't do with this. If we had had any regulations prior to the state regulation, if I remember correctly, they could have still stood. I think that's the way that was explained to us, but we didn't, so we're starting from scratch here. So Boyd, if you want to elaborate, or Harry, on what this is.
It just follows state law, and as you said, there was much debate about what should or should not be done. Signal Mountain's ordinance will provide for a permitting process where, well, number one, there's a grandfather provision. If you've been renting out your home, you're grandfathered in. I don't know that we have any of that, but there are certain restrictions and guidelines. No more than 8 guests. It's got to be more than 30 days. But our ordinance pretty well follows state law. And as Boyd mentioned earlier, if the since the short-term vacation rental is going to be a part of the zoning ordinance, an administrative hearing officer can now hear violations of the short-term vacation rental ordinance and assess penalties more than the municipal court up here could do.
Okay. Boyd, could we, and I'm saying this for people that are watching or people watching this later as well, it's a relatively thick ordinance. This is the first reading. It takes 2 readings to pass this. And will we have a public hearing? Will we need a public hearing with it?
We don't have to have a public hearing for this particular ordinance, but the ordinance that addresses this for the zoning, we will be required to have a public hearing.
Okay. Could we get this document so that those who have short-term rentals up on the town website tomorrow, perhaps? I'll even help with that if it's necessary.
Quickly as we can.
Yeah. That way everybody can have a chance to look at it before we get together next time.
I would, in terms of if there are short-term rentals operating now, I believe the grandfather provision requires that they be following all the laws and requirements absent Signal Mountain requirements. So they would have to be paying hotel motel tax and all of that stuff along to qualify for any grandfathering. If they haven't been doing that, then they don't have that privilege.
How's our hotel motel tax collection been going?
You know, haven't seen many come in, but we don't collect them, so.
Okay. All right, other discussion? Do we have a motion?
Second.
All right. Failing any discussion, we will vote. This is the first reading, and I've already read it, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, it carries on first reading 5-0. All right, here's the second part of this. Just put it away. So we did administrative hearing. We have 3 that we have to do. Oh, here it is, okay. Nope, that's chickens. Carol, do you have it? Page I need for this? Thank you. An ordinance to amend Article 3 and Article 4 of the Signal Mountain zoning ordinance to address the regulation of short-term vacation rentals within the town of Signal Mountain. So what sort of legal magic is this one?
This one just amends the existing Signal Mountain zoning ordinance to include the short-term vacation rentals. The previous ordinance didn't deal with zoning.
Okay.
This one deals with
This one is
zoning.
Yeah.
One of the main things that this does is, in looking at zoning, there are references to guest houses, and ultimately that may have been the intent, that something like this is what they were referring to, but it goes to delete the term guest houses and clarify that that applies to short-term vacation rentals and all of that. So this incorporates where and how you can have vacation rentals, in that it refers to the ordinance that we just passed, and it incorporates it into zoning so that we have a little more latitude in enforcement.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Make a motion.
Bob?
Second.
Okay. I've been quiet.
Second from Susanna or Amy, take your
No, she can have it.
All right, so we have a first and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, carries on first reading 5-0. And this is the one that Boyd was saying just a moment ago, that we have to have a public hearing about this. So there will be a public hearing at the next council meeting, which is June 13th, if I'm not mistaken. It's the second Monday in June. Does anybody want to check that? If anyone is here interested in that?
10th.
June 10th.
I was
Okay.
thinking that was a long time, like June 10th.
All right, so public hearing that day. All right, and that concludes the ordinances part of the meeting now. No? Oh, you're right, I skipped chickens.
I thought we were just talking about chickens.
This is an ordinance to amend Title 10, Chapter 1, Section 10-1023I of the Town of Signal Mountain Municipal Code in reference to keeping chickens and other fowl in town. It was suggested at the last council meeting, and Councilor Dr. Spalding asked that this be on the agenda, so I'll let you take it.
Basically, what I'm asking is that the yearly instatement fee of $15 be eliminated, and the follow-up inspections, that after 10 years of dealing with this, we've had no issues, and right now we probably have more problems with dogs than we do chickens running loose, and we're not picking up any fees for dogs. And so I think this is kind of intrusive, that inspector would be coming by and you should keep paying for your chickens. I think that it's fine to do the initial inspection and pay the $35, but I think after a decade of looking at this, that the $15 fee could be relaxed. Since we've got less than 10 to 12 people that have chickens in the area, and the fees are not, even one full-time inspection would be more than that just to come out and deal with a problem.
All right, any other comments? Butch. I think, it feels like a nuisance at $15, but I think one thing that it's always important to note is when something is working well, it might be working well because there is potential inspection and regulation of it. I mean, one of the reasons that we haven't had problems might be because it's regulated. How do you feel about that?
Well, I feel like that if there is a problem, it can be reinstated. I think this is a 1 year kind of, let's look at it for a year, see if it's a problem, and then if it is a problem, we reinstate it. I think to reward those people who've had chickens for this many years, I think that the $15 inspection fee is not something that we apply to any other kind of animal. You can have 50 dogs in your backyard and there's no inspection fee for that, as long as the police are not called on a nuisance.
Livestock have always been regulated differently, though, than domestic pets. You can't have chickens in your house. I guess you can.
Sure you can.
So I'd like to make a motion that we consider this.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? You guys have to have chicken opinions.
I don't have a chicken opinion, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think it sounds unreasonable. I mean, I see where he's coming from. It sounds reasonable to me.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No one's opposed. Carries 5-0. Now we get to, do you guys want to scoot? Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, let's give them, and thank you guys for coming and observing.
Was that for a merit badge, or what was that for? They just went to
Entertainment.
Entertainment, okay.
I'm grabbing some more water. Anybody else need more water?
I'll take some. Thanks.
I didn't have any.
I'm going to give a shout out to Signal Mountain High School baseball. Right now, they are playing for
Thank you,
a
sir.
spot at state. So, very proud of them. While we're getting water, you know.
All right. 2019-2020 budget. This is just open. We're just going to start. So we've had a series of meetings. We had a budget meeting not last Friday, but the Friday before that. At the end of that meeting, we hadn't got to the place where we give direction to staff as to say, these are the things that we would like to be in the budget resolution. The council has to, so we had a second meeting, and nothing was voted on at that meeting. What happened at that one was just like, okay, let's try it this way, and then you ask staff to then come back and present, what does this cost if we're doing a sanitation fee? What does this cost if we're doing it in terms of taxes? So that town council can then have this discussion, and if what could happen tonight is at the end of this evening, we instruct them as to what the budget ordinance would look like. And then the budget ordinance would be taken up with two readings, the first one being at the first council meeting, June 10, and the second one being at the second council meeting in June. And there also has to be a public hearing for that. So having it opened up in that, how should we proceed, Boyd? What do you need from us?
consensus on what is to be included in the budget, to include anything that's currently there that you would like removed, or anything that's been added that you want to stay, so we can produce the final budget document and the ordinance associated with it.
I wouldn't mind hearing what was cut from, what cuts did we make? Or did you suggest, because Bob and I weren't there, so were there any cuts considered, or was it, like, how do we come, what items were included?
Nothing was
from the
cut from the managers.
So
Do you
we
recall
didn't
anything?
we didn't make any cuts from the
Nothing
current
was
budget?
cut from the manager's proposed
Okay.
budget. And just so folks understand the nomenclature of the monstrous paper, there's a proposed manager's budget, and this is a balanced budget. There are things that department heads ask for that were not included, and it's always the case, and there's well over $1 million worth of asks in here for the departments. If counselors choose to take anything from this book and put it in this book, we also have to show how it gets paid for. If we accept this budget as presented, the town manager had suggested there be a sanitation fee, which would be a different way of funding a department. It's all come out of the general fund, which means it comes straight out of taxes. Council, correct me if I'm doing any of this wrong, council discussed that sanitation fee as an option, also discussed keeping it in the general fund but covering it with taxes as another option. And that meeting where we left it was doing it as tax income, tax revenue, as opposed to an additional fee. And part of the reason for that was a sanitation fee is regressive. Those with the lowest amount, the smallest houses pay the same thing as those with the largest houses. And so it seemed to be harder on those who would be hardest on. And then when you look at the property tax equivalent of a sanitation fee, you have to get up into about the $500,000 range if we were talking with just that before they begin to equal out. The person with the $500,000 home would be paying an equivalent, much smaller amount than the person with the $150,000 home with the sanitation fee, if you look at just the sanitation fee's impact on revenue. Is that
And
correct?
the proposed fee was $18, right?
It would be approximately 18. Can I clarify a couple things there?
Sure.
You said that this budget was balanced. It's balanced assuming an additional revenue of $700,000.
Yeah, I was getting
Okay.
to that. Yeah.
And basically, where we worked down to was to get to that 700,000, because that's an amount we've anticipated over the last few years needing to generate one way or another. It just so happens that 700,000 is about what you would need if you created a sanitation fund. So it was just a mechanism. You had to put something in the budget as another revenue mechanism. So because I wanted to make sure we had that discussion and looked at it, because other municipalities in the area have a sanitation fee. If you just look at property tax rates, it looks like they're considerably lower than us, and they are. But they also charge a sanitation fee on top of that. So it is something that skews the picture, and it is something that's used other places. So I wanted to make sure we thoroughly investigated it, and we had to build a funding mechanism into the budget. So that's what I put in there, and we did discuss it at length. I just wanted to clarify that
Sure.
the need for a tax increase isn't because of sanitation. The tax increase comes if we choose not to cut services or change how we approach things, and we have to generate that money somehow. Sanitation fee was just a mechanism that we needed to explore.
To reiterate what Boyd said, there's no new sanitation expense causing us to consider a tax increase. I'm saying it just a different way. What is causing us to consider that in a budget that is actually trimmed from last year, and correct me if I say anything wrong, this is actually a smaller budget than our past year, so we haven't been spending more and more that way. I mean, as far as this budget isn't a continuation up, this is a bringing of it down, and that's because he was strict with what department heads were allowed to do. It's basically a bare bones budget. But what has changed is we have one thing that has taken money away and another thing that has added expense to us. And the added expense is the cost of the firefighters, which we're happy to pay. So that's one. We have also, town manager recommended, and up to this point, we've all approved or supported a 5% raise for all of our employees, which we need to do in order to stay competitive. So that's within this as well. And then we are going to have the last amount of income that comes in from the hall tax. It's gone after this. The hall tax has drastically affected towns like ours and towns like Lookout Mountain, where you don't have a lot of room. One of the things that's been a lot of room for commercial expansion, and if you filled every space that we have, it wouldn't solve this problem with local option sales tax. So that's where we are, and I think there's been some confusion in the past. Taxes did go up a bit 3 years ago, and I've heard at times saying that was to cover the hall tax. I've also heard at other times that was to cover the fire hall employees. It can't do both, and that's where we are now. Boyd, is that anything to?
Yeah, can we clarify that? Because I was under the impression that 2 years ago, when we first got on council, and Bob, you correct me if I'm wrong, that we addressed the hall tax. We sunsetted the high school, and then we had a felt increase of like, I won't have the math right, but like 17 cents, but it was really a 32-cent tax. Does that ring a bell? So I thought we had offsetted the hall tax 2 years ago. So why are we addressing it again? Or am I looking at it wrong?
For the most part, in these discussions, we haven't talked anything about just increased costs. Year after year, if we do the exact same thing, it costs more. When we changed the tax from, we had 15 cents dedicated to the high school loan. We initially had 32, I think it was set at 30, and as we paid that down and we paid off a capital projects loan that we had, we then built the transfer station, public works facility, for $3 million close, and then the fire station. So as we paid down the loan for the high school, we replaced that with loans and debts for our own facilities. And
so it's not the hall tax.
Right. Most of that is debt service for our facilities. Since 2013, I believe it was 17, 18, I don't have it in front of me, but since 2013, we went up $600-something thousand in revenue. That's it.
Since we have Patsy here, Representative Hazelwood, when exactly does it sunset the?
It's 2021.
2021. But we don't see revenue.
I don't think that's right, because we only have one more payment coming in.
It was 2020, but I could be totally wrong.
2021 is the first year with no hall tax.
There you go. That's it.
This upcoming one is the last.
The upcoming one's the last.
And it's a step down.
Right, but to clarify, 2 years ago, we've already adjusted, we adjusted for the hall tax early. So this increase.
We didn't, though. And it was suggested at the time that we did,
Okay.
but we didn't. Some of us wanted to, and we didn't at the time. Because staff basically told us where we were going to be based on projections, because we could see where we were going. What we couldn't see is that we also had a solid, consistent 30% inflationary fee on every project we did. The economy was booming. We had projects that we bid, we had no bidders for. And those that bid high, and there were things that had to be done. And originally, what did the James Boulevard project look like, and where is it going to end up at from a cost? Okay. Yeah, I think it's relevant to what we're talking about now, because it gives you an example of how much this has changed. And I haven't forgotten your discussion. If I do, though, remind me. I didn't think there would be.
It's an 80/20 project, correct?
80/20.
So the information that I'm looking at right now is that when we originally got the approval from the state, our portion of the cost that was going to be reimbursed to us from the state was about $500,000. So that would have been their 80%. And right now, the current estimated total cost of the project is $1.2 million.
So from 500,000 to 1.2 million, that's...
That was their
Yeah.
80%, so
Yeah.
it would have been somewhat higher than that.
Okay. Were you going to
You
say
said
something more?
500?
Yeah, $505,824.
The 1.2 million is what the state's 80% portion is, so the total, okay.
Yeah. So,
Does that sound about right? Yeah.
so this was a thing that was started, and I think, in hindsight, and none of us were on the council at the time, I don't think, Bob, you weren't there then either, when the James Boulevard project started.
Were
I
you?
think
Bill was.
What's that?
Bill was.
Yeah. In hindsight, Bill, if you guys had known, because you had estimates what it was going to cost then, and it was an 80/20 thing, if you had known that it was going to be $1.2 million, do you think that the discussions would have gone differently?
You know, I'm not sure that it would, because the,
Is your mic, can you turn your mic on, Bill? Thanks.
I said I'm not sure that it would have changed my thought on the project. First, the condition of the road was terrible. No question about that. There was also strong public sentiment that we salvage the rails and replace them. And I believe the grant that we applied for and received was based on the historical properties of the project. There was discussion at the time, we'll just, grind the concrete and pave it with asphalt. And that was met with a resounding no from the public. So, it's sad that costs are what they are, and it's going to be $1.2 million versus $5 million, but it's a project that was waited for forever and needed to be done.
Thanks.
Based on the figures Carol had, it looked like the original project cost was somewhere around $630,000. If that's their 80% of that. Now, I believe early on there were additional costs that the town took on at 100%. So fairly early it started growing, but after 3 years between there and when it was put out for bid, it certainly spiked considerably.
Correct me if I'm wrong as well. To my knowledge, the grant at 80% was based on the original project cost, and that grant is not increasing as a result of increased costs.
Once it's locked in, the amount they commit is a set amount as opposed to a floating 80%, whatever the construction cost is.
So the 1.2
Okay. So, and it's not something that's easy to bail out of a project like this in the middle of. I mean, it's already underway.
So that was in the budget though, right? This one, the big one.
Well, the way it's yes, but
So it's not an added expense.
No, it's current year.
I wanted to know what additions were proposed.
There were only 2 additions proposed out of this, and there are many. And there are 2 additions from this and 1 additional addition.
Okay.
That the additional addition is within the recommended budget book. There's a 5% pay increase for all employees. The town manager did not include himself in that, and we recommend that the town manager's salary reflect everybody else's salary. So
And
that's,
I think you had put it on Facebook. Well, that represents what percentage of the 22% proposed tax increase?
the town manager's
The 5% pay increase.
Across the board.
That's within here.
That's
and
in- that's
somebody
built
else have
into
to do
here.
the math.
So
on
that's
that.
not in the 22%. Did I read that wrong?
Well, okay, the
I'm wanting to know what the 22%
taxes
is.
aren't being raised by, to meet a specific percentage amount. Taxes are being raised, if they are, to cover the expenses. All of the expenses within the budget represent some portion of that. We could break all of those out and figure out what percentage of our budget any single thing is, but in this case, I don't know that number. You could find out what the overall, if you looked on the overall 5% raise and calculated what percentage that is of the total budget, would that give you your answer?
I'll look it up and then I'll be more specific. I'm sorry. Keep going.
Okay, so the other 2 things that were out here that, and you guys correct me because you were involved in it. One is a 2,650, if I'm missing it, I'm not missing it by more than $20 or so. That is a $1 an hour additional raise for Officer Troy Kennedy, who has served as our de facto IT person. And the gentleman, Charles, I think it was, who rode with the officer, talked about the equipment and how it works and how well it all communicates. That was all done in-house. What police departments have to do sometimes is hire outside consultants to come in and take care of that. It's quite expensive. And we've had a guy who's gotten himself trained and done what needs to happen in order to make that happen.
So that's been added, his position, or is it still?
The $1 an hour raise is added. That was in the external budget. That was in the external book. I can't point to something that the new stuff's in because we haven't seen that yet.
If I might, in your packet, there's a couple of sheets that show the changes that resulted from that last.
Oh, thank you.
So that did get reflected, is that right, Carol?
It is now reflected in the numbers that
Yeah.
are in the information that you've been provided.
It's $2,760 for that. Also, and I'll finish with the other things that were added. There was an additional 1.5 miles of paving, 1.52 miles of paving. Paving asphalt costs us $220,000 a mile right now. Loretta, can you speculate how much that has changed in the past year? The per mile cost?
Can you come to the mic, please?
And I think this is also appropriate because it's another place where normal city functions are costing a lot more than they used to.
I don't have the information from like our previous year to last year. To give you an idea of percentage of the cost increase, last year was the largest increase we'd had in asphalt in our paving bid. I don't have that information in front of me. I'm trying to remember what our asphalt prices came in at. We had some asphalt prices that went up that we used to pay maybe $85 to $100 a ton that went up to $200 a ton. Something like that. So that is part of that. I don't know how much of that percentage-wise. I just can't give you a number on
No,
a
that's okay.
percentage.
Yeah, no, I don't want you to say something that you don't know. Yeah.
So that's what that's how much some of our asphalt prices went up last year, in the past year. So we're looking at that trend now. I don't see it going down.
Okay. And I brought that up because it was one of the things that came up in the first budget hearing when she was telling us how much more it's costing to do all the things that have to be done.
Mhm.
So, all right, thank you. So, $338,000 is what that additional 1.25 miles accounts for.
Are we making suggestions on some other things?
Well, there's the rapid intervention packs were not in there, and, I mean, that's not something that was in there when we
That's
were
one thing I wanted to explain is the rapid intervention packs for the fire department were not included, and while they were very important. I wanted to look at other potential funding sources for those, and we discussed that. And thanks to Chief Mitchell, I didn't expect that to come to fruition so quickly, but within 3 days, we had a Homeland Security grant to cover the cost of those. So those have been added in with corresponding revenue from the grant for next year.
Excellent. So that was one of the things that we had said that we weren't going to allow from the supplemental budget, but Chief Williams was able to get a grant, or Chief
Mitchell.
Chief Mitchell, yeah. So great. That's fantastic. Oh, there you are. Thank you very much.
And I'm going to also ask that the Lucas device be added to that.
So the Lucas device that you're talking about, if you want to tell everybody what that is.
Well, I'll let the chief describe it. He's outlined it. Basically, it's an automatic compression device that you can. Right now, it's a manpower, but as quality CPR gets more and more focused on, this device meets that demand so that you can only put so many people in the back end of an ambulance. And I would, just from experience, say that this device needs to be added to our fire department to give them an additional edge on quality CPR. But I'd like the chief to echo that instead of just me.
We talked about, the device's capabilities and things we could use it for at a previous meeting. I included it in our supplemental request, along with, a list of other things. But, they're all important. But, the Lucas device does, it aids definitely our personnel, saves the backs in doing CPR. And it was,
Hi, Patsy.
I included I think I maxed out at 16 supplemental requests, so.
Where did this one rank? And when you guys submitted your supplemental requests, you had to put them in order. It's fifth.
It was, fifth.
Yeah.
The, first two dealt with personnel matters, reorganization of the fire department and fire inspector, then the RIP packs, which are going out of date. That was one thing. Then but the Lucas device was in the top part of the list.
Thank you. Unless, do you have other questions?
No, that was just something I wanted to make sure that if we're looking at that kind of tax increase, this is a lifesaver.
So if those devices were in there, it would change your opinion about how you'd vote on this budget?
It would. It is certainly something that would have to be included for me to support something like that.
Would you be willing to, how would you pay for it?
Well, again, we haven't discussed some of the things that, that I feel strongly about, but this was one of them. And that's the only thing I can tell you is that when you're looking at what they provide, our top three in my opinion, our top three departments is going to be our police, fire, and public works. And when they need something that saves lives, that is not that expensive, when you consider what these devices cost, just even looking at a defibrillator is much more expensive than this device right here, and this is for basic as well as advanced life-saving tools. And I think it's hard to put a price on something that is that life-saving.
But we have to put a price on it, so how would you pay for it?
And again, when we start talking about options to pay, I just want to make sure that this was in our discussion, that this was something that would be in there. As far as supporting the rest of the budget, as far as voting on this, we're still waiting for feedback from public hearings. I want to see, if we have the same amount of energy that was put into No Food City and no sale of the water department with people with T-shirts. If you've got people with T-shirts lining in here that says no more taxes, then you're going to be dealing with how much will people take? Will they take a 22% increase or not? And I haven't seen that level of discussion yet as far as what will the citizens take care of. But if you're going to add to what that total bill is, I think that should be on it.
I hear that. Don't necessarily argue. I think it'd be fantastic. I would love for Chief Williams to, Chief Mitchell, to, are we able to meet this need right now, the need of resuscitating people right now? Bob mentioned saving lives. The opposite of saving lives is losing lives. Are we losing lives because we don't have these machines? That's not fair.
But it's very true.
CPR is something that we do way too often, okay? It's like CPR has been done for years. CPR is absolutely impossible to deliver in a consistent method in the back of an ambulance. It's moving, you go up and down the mountain every day. It's impossible. When we have a rescue that we do oftentimes off the side of the mountain, a trail, when you have somebody in a basket and you're using ropes to carry them up, it's absolutely impossible to do CPR. You just can't do it. There's no way you could do it and move a person like that. This could be used in that situation. So to say these devices give 100% consistent compressions, no matter if the person's upside down, standing on their head, whatever, moving, not moving. So in that sense, they do offer what I would call a higher, more consistent level of compressions when you're doing CPR.
My question was, though, are we losing people?
I apologize, but
I can't.
That puts the chief in a very
Okay,
difficult.
yeah, well, I see that. But let me ask it a different way then. If this is the highest priority we have, why was it your fifth priority and not your first priority?
Well, some things it's hard to prioritize, I'll be honest. I've got fuel and tires in there too. We need fuel to go to the calls. I'm not saying we're running out of fuel, but, when you have a list of needs, putting an absolutely 1 through whatever number, it's hard to prioritize. When I look at my first one was a reorganization of the fire department, because we've put people in a position of supervising other people that, we're not compensating them for. And we need to give them the power to do that supervision. So that was my number one, number one. So if you look at, 1 through 5, 1 through 7, I don't know, I think you could have drawn numbers and they all have an equal, impact on a department in different ways. Some impact the department directly and some impact, lives directly. Like the RIT packs, the reserve safety thing is town manager said. And luckily enough, we were able to take care of that one. So to say why it's where it's at, like I said, I think you could have took any of those and prioritized them in a number of ways.
Okay. Thank you.
So I have a thought on how to pay for it.
Okay.
I guess I've been through all the budget materials a half a dozen times since our last meeting, and it's really light reading. I'm sorry? Yeah. One of the things that struck me was that after rereading Chief Williams' letter about having an additional officer and then listening to Mr. Gardner's comments this evening, I thought that perhaps a little compromise could work to cover this device as well as the additional patrol officer. And that is, it is my understanding that in the last budget year, or this current fiscal year, we deferred paving to cover the cost overruns on James Boulevard. And I think that's on target. My thought is that this covers a mile, the 338,000 covers a mile and a half of additional paving. My thought is we split that over 2 years. Do an additional 3/4 of a mile paving in the upcoming fiscal year and an additional 3/4 in the following fiscal year. And that would give us enough to cover the cost of the officer and equipment, benefits, and this device. Just, kind of throwing out food.
I think that's a great idea. I think I've been pretty vocal about that particular ask, and I know we can't get blood from a turnip. I can't believe that just came out of my mouth. But anyway, I think in addition to that, and I mentioned it in our first budget meeting, I would really like for us to have a meeting with Walden and sit down at the table and really look at some of the things that some of the citizens have put up, the reason why Chief Williams needs an officer. And if you remember correctly, he asked for 1. He needs 3, but wouldn't dare ask us. And that to me, and I was very vocal at the first budget meeting, is really important. He has a report that shows 165% increase to Walden. Now, that may equate to, I think it's like 87 calls, but when you've only got 2 officers, and all morning they're at the middle high school, and afternoon they're at Thrasher, and then if there's 1 call, they both go, I mean, that just really, that's not enough. And one of the most important things that I appreciate in living on Signal is the safety of Signal.
One of the safest cities in the
Yeah,
in the
and
country.
we can't maintain that if we're stretching our resources. And I think Chief Williams has done a great job. And I said in the first meeting, there are other ways to do this. So maybe it's time we do have a meeting. We sit at the table. Maybe we get the ball rolling. I love your idea. But I mean, we're all sharing, it's been said, all the T-shirts, we are one mountain. And I'm not saying, I'm saying let's act like we're one mountain. Let's work together rather than this tax rate's here and we're gonna overcompensate and have 22% tax rate. Let's find another way. Or at least let's look at other options before we go straight to the big increase.
Go ahead, Boyd.
Just so you know, we have had numerous discussions with Walden. We probably have a better working relationship with Walden than we've had in a very long time. One of the biggest issues we have, and I'll kind of get to Bill's question as part of this, when we talked about when they were contracting with the Sheriff's Department, that was for having an officer primarily assigned to Walden. Back then, we were still backing them up quite a bit. This is what concerns me about, and I'm not questioning it, but when you look at a single increase, that could really kind of skew a picture. And you're right, we're talking about total for Walden was 77 in a calendar year. So we're not talking about a huge volume, but it was
But
a
86 in unincorporated.
Right. And to Bill's question, we don't provide that service to Walden. We're providing mutual aid to the Hamilton County Sheriff's Department. And we provide mutual aid to Walden Ridge Emergency Service. And they provide aid to us. Now, is it equal? Is it the same? It's kind of hard to say.
And
the other night,
well, I just want to toss in, because it gets left out sometimes. We actually pay for the county service as well, because we all pay taxes.
Right.
So.
Right.
So we're paying
And
double.
a good example of this, we do back up the county quite a bit. The other night when we had the 2 motorcycle crash and had a fatality, call the county and say, we need your traffic guys to come up. And they sent 2 traffic officers up and spent hours working that, and they basically took over that investigation. Similar to other things that we've had when we have a need. There are certain things, it just does not make sense for us to equip and train to be able to do when we have them to call on. And that's a big reason why we do provide mutual aid on the day-to-day stuff, because when something big happens, we can call them. I'm not arguing a point one way or the other. I just want to make sure we have a clear understanding of exactly what the situation is. We're talking about 77 calls in the course of a year. We're assisting the Sheriff's Department, and we do get assistance in return. We've talked to Walden in the past. The issue we had then was the level of service that they wanted. And for us to provide service during some hours and at a certain level. And my position is if we're going to provide the service, we're going to provide the service the way we provide service. And because it's our reputation, our liability, our responsibility to provide an excellent level of service. I don't care what your address is. If we're doing it, we need to do it well. And I can't say that we won't have continued discussions, and especially at this point, we can do that. But just want to make sure we have a clear understanding that we have worked on this in terms of firefighting, law enforcement, and other ways that we can cooperate. We have different types of communities, and our idea of a proper level of service might be a little bit more than they want to commit to.
So, with it, I'd like to say why I did not include that. I mean, that's what we're doing, is discussing how, and it's interesting. The one problem I see with your suggestion, Bill, is that if we do hire that extra officer this year, you don't just hire him for this year. That person is going to take that amount of money out of the budget every year going forward. So it changes it. Now, you raise taxes to cover that, well, that's a different thing. But you see what I'm saying? So it's not like you get all that money back
I understand that.
for the next year for paving. I am fully in support, and I think we need to do the 5% pay increase for our officers and our police officers, but it's, it's to look the chief in the eyes and say, I drew a circle. Here's a circle when you're looking at the budget. That's how much you get to spend and how much represents all of that. Fire and police, we are extremely safe here and appreciate everything that the men and women who serve us and protect us. They do an amazing job of it. But someone has to talk about where lines are, and things have to be paid for. And so when I started on the council a few years ago, this side kind of a peace sign represented basically our protective services up here, fire and police. We are now, it's not horrible, but we've now crossed the halfway point. You have to say how much you're willing to spend. We are safe, and I appreciate being safe. It's why I want my children and my grandchildren growing up here. It's an amazing town, but we have to look at this bigger picture as well. No one wants to sit up here and say anything that doesn't help our officers. But because you get hammered for it. But on the other hand, you have to look at the overall picture. And so there are 3 reasons why I don't think we should hire that police officer right now. Is we're already raising taxes. We are already behind in road paving. The paving costs more per mile when you do less. There are economies of scale that you only reach with them coming up and paving certain amounts. So that's another part. Another thing that is very important to me is what it says on this, is that this is the town manager's recommended budget. The town manager is the person who runs the departments. He's a former police officer, former police chief, and he's spent time with these departments. He did not recommend that we hire an extra officer. That's something that's external, and it would have been a lot, I mean, that has a lot of weight. That's what he's hired for. So that's my case on it. I think we need to do the paving. I'm concerned about adding to things that cost the budget more year after year. There's one other, and this is maybe the most important to speak to your point. For the 77 calls in Walden.
Well, it's 163 total. I don't think we should differentiate between Walden and the county because the call is a call. In fact, it takes them longer to get to the county.
So if we
and
want,
more time.
So if we want to go to the county, which is where we'd be going to, which is what the manager was talking about, to try to talk about more police coverage up here or some kind of an agreement, our position is better if we haven't hired someone to do that. I think if, in order for us to throw money at something that we think they should be taking care of, we need to, as a council, speak to the county and be involved so that our guys don't have to cover for what they're not covering properly.
I agree with that. I think they should be responsible for the people that live within their town limits. We need to be responsible for ours. I mean, I think we have to have mutual aid because sometimes you're going to have catastrophic accidents and things that come up. But the question should go back to them. I mean, they need to, if there's a shortfall, then let them address that. I don't know why we have to take that on. Because if it's putting a strain on our departments, in the fire department and the police department, then let them take care of that.
Chief, is this extra officer that you're talking about just for mutual aid calls, or is there some other aspect of its utilization here in our own town that we're going to benefit directly from? Because I look at this as the same thing as whether you should or shouldn't fund the SRO for the high school. We went ahead and did it because it was something that we needed to protect our investment with the high school. This is maybe a little different. It is 2 different municipalities, but one thing that just disturbs me is this all focused just because we're backing up the county, or is there something else that we could benefit from this?
No, that was one of several factors, but one of the smaller factors in my mind when I asked. It just happened to fall into that category, but we've had the same number of officers we've had since, I think, 1980. The population has doubled. The traffic is exponentially more, not only from our citizens, but people passing through. Then we moved forward with our accreditation and also our technology initiative with Troy. I pulled him out of patrol to handle all these things because it's so overwhelming he couldn't do both. So actually I'm down one because of having the added function of, he's doing double duty now because we've kind of got caught up. And so he's a patrolman and then he comes back in and does the other things as well. So just the number of calls inside the town, the amount of traffic and the number of complaints that we get have risen exponentially with the traffic because most of what we get are traffic issues. And they want to know why we can't have somebody in a certain neighborhood around the time school lets out or school takes up because of all the traffic and the speeding. And most days I only have 2 working. One's at Thrasher in the morning, we have midnight shifts stay over in the morning to help at Nolan, obviously, but we run out of people, there's nobody else left. So some days we have 3 when there's 2 patrolmen and a supervisor working, and that helps out, but still it's limited. And once you run out of folks and you get everybody committed to a caller and anybody else left.
This also seems to be similar to the sheriff, who is also working on expanding his budget to perhaps get more coverage.
Right.
And at the same time, this is exactly what happened with the SRO. We filled in until they could fill that position, and they did.
Right.
And he's doing the same thing, in my understanding. And so I think that this is really more than just about responding to Walden. It's a whole lot more than that.
Yeah, that was just an
That
afterthought.
makes, I mean, I think, I agree with that then. I mean,
Yeah.
if there's, if we're
But an
having.
SRO doesn't stay on the force. You're talking about putting someone on the force permanently that has,
No, as long as we would have had the SRO, he would have been a member of the department, but when the county had committed, and once they gave us one, then the council decided to do away with that position, so he left. So we're up one, and now we're back down again.
I have a question. So, in your experience, if there is a call in the county, say Corral Road, down that area, and the call comes in, it is the county's responsibility to respond. How often, and this is not a knock on the county, I'll just factual, is the county coming or is Signal coming?
Frequently, we're the first ones to get sent. Now, one
So
thing.
even if the county comes, you've already dispatched officers?
Well, one thing too, and correct me if I'm wrong on the district breakdown, but on the car that's assigned up here, they also have Suck Creek and Tiftonia. So they may be in Tiftonia. We had a wreck up near the Ace Hardware today with injuries, and they were here, but it was about 20 minutes. And a lot of things can happen in 20 minutes, so we handled it, and don't mind doing that. But that was our entire force, today our personnel was 2, and they were both up there. And the county came up and they handled it, but we couldn't tell those people, no, we're not gonna come to a wreck with injuries because, it's not in our jurisdiction. That's just part of what we do. And that's what they do as well. As Bo said a while ago, all we gotta do is make a phone call and they're here. Many times if we're out on something else, tied up on things for Signal, they'll come in and answer calls inside the town for us while we handle our business. So it goes both ways. But it's just an increase in requirements on us. And I hate to keep telling people, we'll do what we can, but we've got 65 miles of roadway. We can't be everywhere on top of answering calls. And they think we don't care, about speeding or running past a stop sign when the bus has got the sign out or something, but there's only so much we can do. So my intent and my thought on the additional officer would be a kind of a split shift to address those specific hot spots that we get complaints on over and over and over again, so that the others can answer calls. And if he's not busy, he or she's not busy, they could address these areas, problem areas with traffic. And then if they weren't doing that at that particular time, they'd answer calls as well. I mean, with the intent of kind of a special projects initiative. So that was my primary reason. And
thank you. You support your case passionately and well. What we have to decide is, do we pave less road? So there's an actual impact on citizens there as well. And we've just had the wettest year in the history of the Tennessee Valley, and our roads are in tough shape because of that. And we paved less in order to finish another project that already cost us too much. So that's why this is complex.
Oh, of course. And it was for sure I wouldn't go get anybody if I didn't ask. So I ask, and if you can't fund it and you decide not to, we'll continue the mission and continue to provide services. It certainly would help, though.
Thank you.
So I'm thinking back to the original question, why are we not going through the budget and looking at other ways we can, maybe it's not the road project that we cut back on, maybe there's other areas.
Do you have any specific suggestions?
I wasn't at the last budget meeting, so no, I don't at this point, but I'm going to comb through this and look for something before I'll vote for a 22% tax increase.
Our task tonight is to, unless you want to have another meeting, which we can, but our task tonight is to get to the place where we come to consensus, or at least majority, it'd be better if we had consensus, as to what we are tasking staff to write as the budget ordinance. And so we needed to come tonight with our plans. So how would you pay for what you're proposing we do?
I don't know yet. I want to have a meeting with Walden. I've already suggested that. I want to talk about the sanitation. I'm still not clear on an $18 sanitation fee, which would be monthly, versus what is the, can you be more detailed on what the impact is on a $600,000 house for that tax increase versus the fee? Because it just seems like it's just another tax.
Do you think we should wait until you have a meeting with Walden before we vote on the budget? And do you think there's a chance that Walden is going to say, well, we'll do that?
I think we should have another meeting, because
So
I
you
think
do
the
wanna have a meeting.
citizens are just kind of hearing now what happened, and I had asked you back last Friday to wait until we had a full council to have that meeting, and so Bob and I weren't able to be there and weren't able to be a part of it. The reason I couldn't be there earlier.
Let's clarify. Bob has chosen to come to none of the budget meetings.
No, wait a second. I haven't chosen.
You told us.
just
I
had
had
back
an obligation, Dan, and you
no,
said that in
yeah,
you said that in an email to one of your respondents that I chose not to, and it's not that I chose not to. I have obligations that I have to meet.
And we have an obligation.
And I gave you notice that because of these impending obligations, I can't serve anymore past July 15th. But I'm not here saying I'm not going to go to a meeting.
Well,
that's just plain patently wrong.
You weren't able to come to any of the budget meetings.
That's correct.
Okay.
I'm going through cardiac rehab.
And I'm sorry.
Okay? And so I have some other issues going on too. I've got just obligations. And so I gave you notice. I said I wouldn't be able to go to those at that time. Like Amy just said, if there's another scheduled meeting that I can make, I'll do everything I can to make it.
Well, I had proposed that we do it on this meeting, and I had asked you repeatedly. I talked to you on camera, off camera, and sent an email, which was totally okay, proposing that we as a council meet to have this type of discussion.
This is what we're doing.
No, you're wanting to make our recommendations now. I couldn't come to that meeting, neither could Bob, because I told you I had an obligation every single night that week.
So you said that you couldn't make a meeting this week in order to finish what we started, which is our task, is our job as a council in order to present this to.
No.
And you were given the
Dan.
opportunity, and so were you, Bob, which didn't require a meeting, to submit your recommendations, what you think should be in or should be out, and they would be read in. We got none of that.
I thought that's what our discussion tonight would be, Tony.
But we are
Okay.
doing that too tonight.
Okay, so as far as giving the town direction, it may take another day or another week.
That's my
And there's
point.
there's no urgency in that respect. If we have to have a special meeting, we'll
All
call
right.
another special meeting.
Let's schedule a meeting if we're not going to get anywhere tonight. And I'm fine with that. Suggest a date.
Okay.
We could just put the second, well, we need to have a work session so that we sit down at the table.
Yeah, it needs to be a work session.
Just so everybody knows, kind of mentioned this already, but budget review requires 2 meetings. We have 2 meetings in June. The new fiscal year starts in July. We're basically following the calendar that's followed most years, where you have a budget meeting. But generally, at the end of the budget meeting, you're giving your recommendation for what the budget's going to look like. So when the budget ordinance comes up, staff has presented it. And that's what we hope to accomplish tonight. But right now, I'm feeling like we might not. I mean, we still could vote. But I think it's important, if you have things you want in or you don't want out, that you talk about how they're going to be funded. And you don't have any of that with you tonight. And you
No, because I had something to do every single night. So I wanted to have that conversation here so that we could collectively do that. But you already met and have come up with your solution, which is a 22% tax increase. So I need time to read over that and have a discussion. Citizens didn't even know that we met. I mean, I got a ton of
We
emails
met.
today.
Citizens that are citizens who knew that we met. This is reasonable.
Okay,
I mean,
4 people.
No, raise
And
your
this
hand.
room was
Raise your hand.
full.
Wait, raise your
It
hand and
was-
let's count.
This is not the same amount of people that was here 2 hours ago.
Knew that we were meeting to talk about the budget.
No, last Monday.
And
I mean, I think, obviously, I don't think that we're going to be able to resolve this in 2 meetings. I'm glad we met the other day because we had momentum. We needed to continue the conversation. And I'm sorry if somebody had to leave early because of a previous obligation, but we still had the momentum going in our conversations, and we were able to hash through the rest of it. That doesn't mean that we have to make a final decision tonight. So I agree with you, Amy, and I agree with you, Dan. I think we need to meet again. We owe it to the voters and to the constituents to keep having these conversations. This is a really tough spot we're in. Nobody's excited about it. Maybe it's going to be a 22% tax increase. Maybe it'll be 15. Maybe we can find a way to reduce it and whittle it down. So let's try to build consensus instead of arguing about when we're going to meet or if we're going to meet. Let's just say we're going to meet, and let's get on with it.
I agree.
Thank you.
Suggest a date. And it still doesn't take away what we're supposed to do tonight. We still need to talk about how we're going to pay for things, what things go in, and what things we want to come out.
Okay.
I think perhaps we go home and reflect on all the material once again, dig through it, see if there's anything that we think can be removed without affecting public safety or quality of service, and then have those items prepared for when we meet next.
I think that each council member owes it to the voters to go through this budget and really do our homework with due diligence. And I will tell you, based on this conversation, I have not studied this budget deeply enough. And I apologize for that. This is my first time going through this budget process. That being said, this is still not easy. I mean, it's not like we're just going to say, well, let's not pave that road or let's not hire that police officer. These are like really important issues. We need to be able to support our town. We've got a crumbling infrastructure in places. We've got obviously a shortfall in our fire department and our police department. We've got paving projects that need to be dealt with. Selfishly speaking, my backyard is washing away because of these heavy rains we're having. So I'm going to make darn sure that somebody's going to come up and pick up all the debris off the side of the road that's in front of my house so my backyard doesn't wash away, because I'm right on Shoal Creek. And I think a lot of people have tangible issues like that that they're dealing with. And if it's going to require a tax increase, and it's going to be a big one, then let's do a sales pitch and talk to everybody about it and get feedback and let the public come. And that is part of the process that Dan's been talking about. Open it up. You know, let everybody come study the budget and go through the notebooks and read it. You know, we can all, let's work together as a community. We can figure this out. We are smart enough to do it. So there's my 2 cents.
Appreciate that, Susanna. Thank you.
I think that was worth 10 cents, though, at least.
Maybe 10 cents. Maybe not 22 cents, though.
That's all I'm asking for. I know we got to raise taxes, but let's find another way.
Propose a date.
I'm not going to be able to give you a date until checking schedules tomorrow. So I won't be able to give you an answer clear cut tonight.
I'm wide open.
I should be available. I would want it to be after 5.
Yeah.
So I'll just make myself available. But if you want to, Bob, look at your calendar first, and then we can do what we've done in the past, which is just send out. But I think I'm pretty only.
We send out the whatever
Yeah.
that little.
Does anybody else have any?
Focus on next week.
Yeah.
I keep
And
looking at my calendar.
We're not having a meeting technically the 27th, right?
Right.
So, and because, what was that, why were we not having?
Memorial Day, I think.
The Memorial Day, okay.
I'm thinking the 20th, because we're off the 27th. But you can just look at that.
Okay, you saying the 20th?
It doesn't give us an
What
off
day
day
is
in May,
that?
but it does at least not give us an extra day.
What day is it? 20th?
It's a Monday, a week from today.
So we're going to close this out now?
Do we want to, should we do like a work session, kind of like we did
That's what we're going to do, yeah.
last time? Is that what we're saying? Okay.
Yeah, it's just easier to get the budget out and look at it and talk about it.
So is everybody going to come prepared to
Yep.
say what
Yep.
you want
Yes.
in, what you want out?
Yes, we
and
are.
how to pay for it?
Yep.
Everybody on board
Yep,
with
and
that?
we're all going to play nice.
Is Chris Cole here? Is he still here? I know he'd spoken earlier. Again, the alternatives that were proposed, speaking to Ms. Thomas, when you're talking about alternatives, you know, the sale of the water department and having a big corporate partner up here were turned down. So there's only one avenue left, and that's raising your taxes. And until there's enough people with "Don't Raise Taxes" T-shirts in the front rows here, it looks like taxes are going to get raised. And
Exactly.
well, it's going to take more than just T-shirts, because there was a lot of activism that was going along with stopping those projects. So if you want to get those kind of level
Well,
of
and
activism.
I would like to say too, if you're interested in not having corporate partners up here and you want, I have a sign right here that says there's no place like Signal Mountain, Tennessee. And I want to preserve that, and I'm willing to pay a little bit extra in order to live in a community where we don't have huge commercial partners with big asphalt parking lots.
And I'll say that people got up here and said the exact same thing. So until that balance is changed, we're going to be digging into our pockets for taxes, because that's the only place to get it right now. That's my best answer I can give you.
It's a trickle-down effect of what Bob is sharing, not selling the water system and choosing to retain it rather than getting out of debt. Out of debt and getting $6 million forest, whatever, a lot of money. We chose to keep the water system and learn to maintain it, which has a trickle-down effect. Then we also rejected, and I was part of that, we rejected what he's referring to as a rezoning that would have been a big tax revenue for us. So we are missing out, and they've subsequently moved to Walden, pulled out, and are probably going to be coming back. So we've lost out on that, so we have to make that up. So anyhow.
May I speak?
I don't, that's appropriate.
It would be unusual to do it that way. I'm sorry. Since you would like to address Counselor Speak.
I'm happy to talk to you after the meeting.
Well, I mean, you could actually, since she wants to talk to you, would you be fine if she spoke to you now?
No, because I can tell, I want to be nice about it, and I feel like you're going to be inappropriate, so I'll wait till we cool down.
Wait.
You asked me.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. So anyway.
I think that we're going to have those deliberations again when we meet, so.
Sure.
We've already had those conversations in depth, and so everybody just come prepared with your best argument.
Yeah, let's put the train back on the tracks. So our, Boyd, you're going to get this arranged for next week.
Yes, sir.
All right.
The final thing that we have under discussion is council vacancy application in process. Do you have is the proposed in here?
Yes, I sent you guys the original, the one that we used last time. And since then, I've had some input, and suggestion was made that if you guys will note the application you have in your packet for the beautification committee. Our board application has kind of an introduction on it, and suggestion was made that we might want to put the same type of thing on here. So there's a general overview of the council's duties and responsibilities, when the meetings are, and then the same type of, almost exactly the same questions for consideration before somebody applies. Other than that, since I sent the original to you, the only thing that's been added is a question about how many council meetings you've attended in the last 2 years. And I changed the last section. It says that it will be a term that will begin on or about July 15th. so that we have some latitude there on the actual appointment date. So that's what we used before with the suggested changes incorporated. And if there's anything else needed, I can make those changes, or if council's satisfied with this, we can
Since, I don't know if the audience has it in hand, but it's a relatively, it's very different from what we had last time. And if you'll indulge me, I want to read through what some of this is, because I think it's appropriate to what we're working on tonight. The town council is the legislative body of the town of Signal Mountain. Among the council's primary responsibilities are adopting an annual budget, setting the property tax rate, establishing fees and fines, considering and voting on a wide range of ordinances and codes, authorizing major expenditures, establishing policies, and approving authorized contracts and agreement. The council also serves as beer board and water utility board. New council members are required to complete 12 hours of utility board training within 12 months of taking office. The town charter provides detailed information regarding the powers, functions, and structure of the town government. Town council normally meets twice a month on the second and fourth Monday at 6. Special meetings may be scheduled as necessary. Council members also serve as liaisons to various committees, commissions, and boards, and attend those meetings as well. Questions to consider before applying: what is my motivation for applying to the town council? Do I fully understand what is expected and required of me? Am I committed to the purpose, duties, and responsibilities of a council member? Can I afford the demands on my time, resources, and energy? Can I attend meetings regularly, making them a priority for the duration of my term? Am I willing to perform a reasonable amount of work outside of regularly scheduled meetings? Can I work effectively with members of the council, town manager, and staff? Am I committed to serving even if the going gets tough and controversy arises? Am I willing to participate in necessary training, education, and development activities to improve my effectiveness as a council member? It's a lot we're asking of people. But it needs to be considered because it's an important role that we have here as well.
Did you mention you don't get paid?
And you don't get paid. And people are going to dislike you at some point, but you know what you signed up for and what you're getting paid.
Yep.
So anyway, hope we have some folks who take us up on this. One thing that was mentioned in here that I want to bring up again, and we still haven't gotten this right yet. We need, at every council meeting, I propose that at every council meeting, we have a list of the committees that have met since our last meeting, and report actual council liaison reports. And it's something we're talking about. I think asking staff to do that, I think, is not the way that should be done. I think because committees report to council members, I think we need to take a more active role in getting our committees meeting regularly and reporting to us. And Harry, was it you or was it Phil? I asked at one point, can we have draft minutes? Was it you?
Yeah, you did ask me that.
I asked you that in your interview.
Yeah, and we talked about it at the council meeting too. And my answer is, you can have draft minutes. You just need to make it clear that these are drafts and they are not the official word from the meeting until they're approved by the board.
Okay. Because one of the problems that has happened, I think, that derails us knowing what's going on with committees is sometimes they don't meet for a month or two, and you never, by the time the minutes come and gone, the issue that it would have been about, it's either not been done or it's been done. Anyway, so that's one of the things I think we need to take on ourselves. I'd like to know if you guys agree with that. I've brought this up a few times, but I think I've just monopolized the conversation. Thoughts?
I think checks and balances are good. I agree.
Anything?
I'm going to leave that up to the person who replaces me.
All right, tentative agenda for June 10. We have, everybody had a chance to look over it? It's the second reading on all the things we did first reading on tonight, and hopefully by then we will have a first reading on the budget. Let's talk about, for a moment, about the public hearing. Where does council feel the public hearing should be? We have the option of it being first or second meeting. What's your thought, Bo?
Generally, we've done them, I think, in the conjunction with the second meeting, so that once you get past first reading, then you have a solid document that truly reflects the intent of council and what they're going to do. As far as the actual public hearing on the budget. Doesn't mean you couldn't have a public comment period ahead of first reading as well.
If we had it ahead, you might have it, ahead of first, or you could have it after the first reading at the first meeting as well, would be an option.
Correct.
Before the second reading at the second meeting or after the first. So do you guys want to keep it where it is before the second reading at the second meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Is everybody comfortable with that? All right, so we can push that on the schedule as well. Seemed like there was one other to go along with that. Oh, other business. Anyone? All right, let's all breathe and recognize that we all love this town, and there's not a person on this dais up here. If you were in trouble, I wouldn't come to help you, and I think that you feel the same way about everyone else sitting here. So let's move to the next step. This is going to be hard. We have a town that it has a high standard of living and it expects high standards in what we do. We have circumstances that we lost the hall tax and we were required by law to build a fire station. Those expenses are real. Our paving expenses have gone up astronomically. That's not something we can change. The economy's been hot. We haven't had enough people bid. Everything has cost us more. So whether you agree or disagree with anyone or everyone up here, everyone is just trying to do their best to figure it out. And I clearly have a difference of opinion from some council members on some things, but it doesn't mean they're wrong and it doesn't mean I'm right. We're all just trying to figure this thing out. So let's lower the temperature a little bit. Please be nicer to each other on Facebook. It could get better. It's a small town. We're going to see each other at Pruitt's at the salad bar, probably tomorrow. So sorry for the speech making, but we can do it. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Did you have fun? Thank you.